Product Talk with Malthi.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Product Talk with Malthi, and I'm your host, Malthi, a product leadership coach and trainer. So today, I'm super excited to have my guest, Sathish KS, a seasoned technology leader. Welcome to the episode, Sathish.
Thank you, Malthi. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. It's my pleasure. So let's get started with a little bit of introduction of Satish. So Satish is a CTO at Zeotap, which is a leading customer data platform provider in the European region. An executive and technology leader, he comes with decade-plus experience in building data and analytics products across multiple domains like MarTech, AdTech, IoT, anti-fraud. And prior to Zeotap, he has spent time at Ola building their data platform and fraud prevention platforms. And interestingly, I also see that he is also an avid practitioner of Tai Chi. So thank you, Satish, for sharing these facts with us. Yeah.
Thank you.
And today we are going to basically double down on the most happening topic, which is about data, right? I think in the last decade and a half, data has kind of transformed our lives, whether it is a digital native organization or it is a legacy organization. Everybody is today on that path of leveraging data and see how it can make a difference to their business. So how did your journey start in this space?
My journey in data started during my Cisco days. So it's a very interesting story. We were trying to collect huge amounts of data to optimize the building power consumption systems. So typically, many people start in this big data area from this data warehouse, and they move on to this Hadoop platforms. But mine was started with a NoSQL journey. So where for the huge data collection, the traditional databases really failed when we went to production. So that is when we wanted to modernize the data platform, and we started experimenting with multiple NoSQL DBs. Now there are various categories of NoSQL DBs, but we started experimenting there. And that is where my journey with data started. And it is not like by choice I did a strategic investment or anything, but it just was served to me on a platter. I was the architect at that time and I had to solve for it. And once I solved for it, I figured out, oh, this is a brilliant space in terms of what are the challenges which are coming our way. And there I am. I'm stuck onto it for almost a decade now in various verticals.
So in today's digital economy, Satish, right? Data is often referred to as the new oil, right? So how do you think these data platforms are helping businesses harness this oil effectively?
Okay, since you provide the metaphor, I still remember Ambani's speech in one of the Geo launch when he told data as the new oil. I don't know where's the origin of that particular metaphor, but it's a very nice metaphor because if you look at what happens in the oil industry, they do exploration, they do extraction, they do a refination, they do a distribution. This is exactly what we do in data platforms as well, right? You extract data from various places and you do a refination. But where the challenge is in terms of extraction is from, again, multiple places, and refination is also a little, I would say you need to put lots of sophisticated refinations. And in terms of distribution, it has evolved over the period of time in terms of real-time batch to multiple endpoints and how they consume, how they want to consume, differential distribution, various things, right? So this term called datafication is really driving our economy at this point in time. So that there are three things. One is the platformification. If you look at the Udai and those kind of platforms, the JAM trio as they call it. Then the second thing which is driving is the datafication, right? Which is again coined way back in 2013. Luckily at the same time is when I moved to data, alluding to your previous question. So it's like a mix of three heavily loaded terms: modernization, data, and platform. Okay. So data from the datafication. And modernization is how they are going to make this entire process agile so that the data democratization happens across the business very fast and quickly. So I strongly believe every industry is becoming data rich. Name anything, right? The food delivery, hyperlocal delivery, or even a traditional enterprise, which is serving probably oil and gas, everything has become data rich for various reasons. One might be for consumer reasons, one might be to attack the bottom line, to have a better preventive maintenance measures, another might be for better supply chain optimization. So you have this myriad of use cases where the data can be used into. So how they collect it richly and process them smartly, they stand to have a huge advantage. The classic case is the new age insurance industries, right? Which are able to hyper personalize your insurance products for each of the customers. So like this, you can quote many examples where data has become a differentiator,
Right.
and how they process not just the data. Many, of course, data we have been having for quite some time, right? Even banks have been having for 30 years. They have in their COBOL system. But how you smartly process and activate them both for your internal and external users, that makes the key difference. So this is, I would say, the distribution is one of the key items in terms of how you are going to harness this oil effectively. Otherwise, it just stays there, and you can have a vanity metric saying, hey, I'm storing 60 petabytes of data. No use. How do you activate it? So that is where the entire thought process has to be.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, there is a follow-up question, Satish, on that. I think somewhere recently I was reading that a lot of companies are actually sitting on a lot of data, but
Yeah.
how effectively are they able to, transform, enrich, and actually leverage that for making those decisions? I think that percentage is still fairly not very high, right?
Yeah.
May not
Yeah.
be very small, but not fairly very high. What is your point of view? Why? What is the reason for that? Is it because there is a lack of awareness? There is a lack of prioritization? Why is that?
It's a bunch of things, I would say. In terms of it's fundamentally it's a mindset and cultural problem if you think about it. Business, say for example, for a bank, number of account opening might be the key metric. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
they could probably do it by putting many people on the ground, horsemen on the ground, right? So, if you look at it in your classical psychological parlance, you have something like the Maslow pyramid. So, the context of where this bank is operating, suppose it's a super advanced economy, they would have exhausted the horsemen on the ground. In which case, they start looking at additional avenues where they could increase the customer acquisition. So,
Mm-hmm.
that is when they start looking at, oh, I have so much of data, and this person has visited the bank 3 times, or he started a journey in terms of a sign up and stopped at this point. Can we reach out to him and figure out this thing? But whereas say in a different context, where probably even if you look at India, of course India, there is a huge digital transformation going on, we are still able to solve many things operationally. So all the CIOs, currently CIO and CDO is a trend in terms of recruitment as well. They have to balance between this TCO of operationally managing things versus a data driven things. But eventually the journey is all same. It's just that each person is in a different trajectory in the same path. Over a period of time, this will be exhausted and they'll have to move to this. So
Move to
that
the
that cultural thing is the first thing which I see is a barrier in terms of the entire data driven adoption. Second thing is, there is a principle called the Shirky Principle, right? It was created by a person called Shirky. So
Okay.
what it says is institutions will try to protect the problem for which they are the solution.
Uh-huh.
So I'm repeating, institutions will try to protect the problem for which they are the solution. Assume you have hired analysts, okay,
Mm-hmm.
who are
Okay.
doing daily analysis of your finance data and coming with some underwriting recommendations. Now you replace it with a more data-driven approach. Probably analyst 100 can be reduced to just 10 or 15, so that they just need to figure out whether that prediction of that particular data-driven component is correct or not, and say sign it off. Okay.
Hmm.
So what this 100 people fundamentally and their managers, what they'll do by this principle, by this is where this is in a way the resistance to change which I alluded to, right? So this principle acts a lot in all organizations. So how do you get all these herd together and figure out that, hey, by virtue of not doing this operational work, your work is going to eventually get upgraded. So that kind of a overall macro setting has to be created by the management, and probably from the overall context as well, right? So that is
Correct.
another important thing in terms of how you make this data more activated. The third thing is, one of the things is again, Shirky principle is one, and another I probably how you create these institutions, right? Say you have a finance, you have a billing system, you have multiple systems. So eventually they are focused on their particular area to deliver the best value. So these kind of create multiple data silos in place. And how do you manage this? This is a more of a product and technical problem in terms of if you walk into any enterprise, right? A simple example is customer data or the information about the customer would be on a median spread across 30 different systems. Okay.
Completely.
If it's a digital native, at least 10 systems. If it's a huge enterprise, it will go up to hundreds. Now, how do you kind of curate this? Okay. And again, it comes to the TCO principle. What is my cost of curating this? And based on this, what is the returns you could calculate? So these are all product questions, right? How's the cost? How can the returns be measured and all these? So once you get all these jigsaw together, what happens is naturally there will be a executive sponsor in terms of, okay, let's move ahead with this project. And this entire data transformation becomes a key part of your digital transformation journey, which is rapidly happening in advanced economies and which India is warming up to. India has this great divide. You have this one set of generation which has leapfrogged into the mobile world without even looking at the laptop. And you have this one generation which is stuck in the pre-desktop era. So you have this gap. So filling this gap is a very important question. That's why I see many products which might work very well in a US context or Canada context don't really work well in Indian context because they need to rethink about this gap between these two layers.
Correct. Actually, yeah, I mean, we have actually leapfrogged into this question since you brought this topic. This was also something that I was planning to ask. So, since we were talking about this, and data silos is a real problem, and I'm sure you've been working on these data platforms for a decade now. You would have seen it and experienced it. So, how are companies solving for it?
The short answer to that question is Malthi. Companies are progressing pretty well. They are warming up to this idea in terms of managing the data silos. I won't say they are going to break down the silos because at least it's my personal opinion. Breaking down may not be the right idea always because again, let me throw another trivia here. There is another law called Conways law, and there is a Conways law. So that is a very beautiful book called Team Topologies, which kind of digs deep into how your organizational structure establish how your systems are architected and how your systems are architected created the data silos.
Okay. That's a good recommendation. So, I'm going to check it out.
Yeah. So data platform is the inverse Conway's law maneuver in a way. Once you say data platform, it's a more horizontal thing and it is trying to maneuver the Conway's law. It understands this is my organizational structure. So my system architecture is going to be like this. So my data silos are going to be like this. So the intelligence of certain items are all going to. So it maps all this and it can create a reverse engineering of that process. In a way, this is broadly what's happening in many of these organizations which are trying to manage data silos. Now, coming from a very product and tech perspective, what are the, I would say, non-functional requirements to manage this, right? You need to figure out, see, why people are afraid of letting or exposing their data. First thing is, one is they don't want to expose inadequacies. Second thing is they don't want to expose it so that somebody writes and corrupts it. They want to maintain their system of records as pristine as possible, right? And the first one is more of, I would say sometimes it's hiding inadequacies. So how do you manage these two problems can you productize this? This is the question. So there are, I would say, theoretical solutions in terms of master data management, and it discusses a lot about system of record and how to convert it to a system of reference. And there are generic solutions like the latest data warehousing and the data lake, as they call it, right? The data lake solutions, which is coming up. It's like almost a decade old now. I wouldn't call it latest and greatest, but it's still a valid solution. And in that too, there are multiple architectures. Somebody says as a data mesh where everyone thinks their own silo becomes a data product where people can consume with all these controls in places. Another is a data fabric, which is like a centralization of that platform and democratization of the data. And the most interesting thing which is happening is people are looking at more surgical solutions. See, if you look at a company, there might be a certain business centric metrics. There might be
Mm-hmm.
certain customer centric intelligence. So
Mm-hmm.
let's not talk about data. Let's talk about intelligence. Okay, business intelligence is there, customer intelligence is there, product set of intelligence is there, operational intelligence is there. Now there are specific data platforms. So, for example, there are RevOps platforms. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
revenue operations. This is a combination of intelligence from your CSM, customer success, your marketing operations, and your sales operations, right? And it is trying to solve the revenue problem overall,
Correct.
because these are the three sources of revenue in a business. And how do
Right.
you solve it? Like that, if you want to solve customer engagement problems, there are customer data platforms, and customer data platforms surgically look at only the customer intelligence strewn across this thing. So you have this general bucket and you have this specific surgical buckets. So these all evolutions happening. Nothing is set in stone. At the end of the day, it is the organizational's tactical measures of how they figure out where their organization is and apply these to kind of manage the silos. But the management is actively happening.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think about these very surgically sources of data. Okay, so that's coming from an expert. Thank you for.
Oh, yeah. I saw that healthcare expert coming in. That's a beautiful podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the whole idea is for my own. I would say intention of learning from the experts like you and some of the other speakers on the podcast. That's also one of the reasons why this exists.
Yeah. This is
Yeah.
very, very good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So that's actually very, very interesting, Satish. So going a little bit more deeper, right? Now, just kind of connecting some of the questions which we were discussing earlier. Organizations are going towards this digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
They are sitting on a lot of data. The idea is that how do we leverage that? In
Mm-hmm.
order to do that, these different siloed systems have to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And on top of that, now we have the biggest disruptor in the last few years, which is AI.
Yeah.
Right? And the challenges, I think, probably for a digital native company versus a non-digital native company, one of the legacy companies, might be very different.
Yeah.
So, how are companies thinking about their data strategy now?
Okay. So one of the market pushes, which probably you also privy to, Malthi, is as a generationally we are becoming impatient. Anything,
Yeah.
anything you want it to be done now, instant. It has
Yeah.
to happen immediately, right?
Right.
So this aspect of real time and just in time is disrupting almost every vertical we can think about, right? So traditional data strategies were all batch systems. They consume a historical, and they had a historical view of data, not a future view of data, right?
Correct.
So how this historical view or the current happenings, how we are going to merge these two together, right? You have the historical happenings, then you have the current happenings. How you merge this together to serve a more real time and just in time? So real time is like a flow, and just in time is you ask for something, you're able to give something, right?
Correct.
So a classic example is like how many times you would have raised this Airtel and Act cases. Every time you have to start the whole context. I raised another ticket at that time. There was a similar kind of incident. Imagine the person who's engaging with you immediately telling, you have faced this issue in the past. This is the reason for that issue. We are checking this issue is the same or not. And if it is not the same, we'll be giving you. So that immediately kind of enhances your loyalty to that brand, right? In terms of the thing. So that is a just-in-time use case in terms of how you could work it out.
Okay.
And the second thing is, since we talked about AI product, a robust feedback mechanism is super important for all AI products. Okay. The third is the operational thing. See, data pipeline by itself, any pipeline for that matter. So since we talked about oil as the first question, like how oil pipeline, the length and the number of pipeline is going to increase the operational challenges, data pipelines are increasing. So general experience which I have had over the last years of building data pipelines is you should apportion a bandwidth for operations of at least 10% failures. Okay, you could reduce it, but have that as a standby, as a commando unit who can go and rectify it, right? So the ops strategy, the operability of the entire platform, that is another important thing, strategy to think about. In the past, in the batch, it is okay. You could slowly go the next day because you're dealing with historical data. You can say run it again and get it done. The next one is data platforms inherently can blow cost. Okay, this is something everyone should be aware of. Okay,
Yeah.
suddenly you'll see somebody ran some data scan. They wanted to fetch something, and $5,000 is blown away.
Yeah.
And by nature, this is like stock market. After it falls, only you'll know. Okay,
You get those AWS bills.
you'll see only the cloud vendors are super smart. They won't alert you when it is happening. They'll alert you the next day. Yesterday you spent $5,000. What can you do? Nothing. it is spent. So that eye around the cost is an important data strategy. Even though many people may not talk about it, cost of the product is an important strategy. The last and important thing is, with any of these particular new age items or innovations which is happening, regulations kick in. Right. So you need to have a clear strategy to manage regulations and the privacy aspects of it. So I think these are the items I would list: real-time, just-in-time, the feedback mechanism, operability, cost, and regulations.
Awesome. And okay, so that also brings us to a new, breed of, I would say, functions which are now part of these organizations, right? Earlier, we would only have engineering and we would have, let's say, product, program, and other functions, right? And now, bringing digital data, bringing AI, we have further evolution here. You have ML engineers, you have data scientists, you have data engineers, you have product managers, right? So, and in some of the, especially in I think more mature organizations, I also hear something called as a functions like customer data product managers, right? So, in your experience, that how can you just elaborate what is the function of a data product manager? What are their roles and responsibilities?
Interesting. So let me give it a thought in terms of data product manager versus the traditional product managers, right? So what you're thinking about.
Right.
Couple of things just drawing from the previous answers, right? Data product managers and AI product managers. The first thing which changes in an AI product is all things AI are probabilistic. Okay. So the thinking probabilistically is a very important trait of a data product manager. And that means what are the boundary conditions which can happen? And there is no single output, right? So in a typical transactional application, you give some input, you'll get the same output.
Correct.
But say in an AI product, today you give one input, you'll get something. Tomorrow it might have changed because all the factors it is considering has changed, right?
Right.
So that I would say thinking probabilistically is one of the most important trait of a data product manager compared to a traditional product manager. Second thing is, I would say all the previous things. Okay, just talking about that data and AI products thread itself. Other thing is AI product. Other important trait is it could create. This Dasavatar movie, the butterfly effect, right? So. You do some small change somewhere, it creates a major change somewhere.
Right,
so,
right. Ripple effect.
So, yeah, ripple effect and butterfly effect. Ripple effect and butterfly effects, the changes, butterfly effect can amplify in negative or positivity. Okay. Ripple effect is the same thing going on and on. So it might generally die down at the, but whereas this can amplify and create something really nasty or something really good. Okay. Simple example is assume, say this thing, how supply chain works, right? So supply chain, people are hyper optimizing in terms of how much they want to do. But your crop cycles on the other end, it can happen only once in 3 times a year or 2 times a year, right? So unless how you handle at that level, whether you can predict which crop has to be done so that you can do that. So there you are managing a very high time window, whereas here in the bottom end of funnel, you're trying to manage a very short minutes time window, right? So you're optimizing here really fast in terms of inventory. I don't want. Suppose say daily you place 100 kg order, and by hyper optimizing, you're putting Monday 100 kgs, Tuesday 50 kgs, Wednesday 150 kgs, and Thursday say 10 kgs, right? Just because of the seasonality, I optimize this system. But the ripple effect or the butterfly effect it can create on the other systems, right? How will the transportation manage if you're suddenly asking 150 kgs? Or if you suddenly say 10 kgs, how will he manage that? How will, say, the the startups like Baycool exactly solve this problem.
Right.
Okay, so the product manager needs to have this horizontal thought.
Right.
Okay, because in a transactional system, if you nuke a transaction, it is gonna the blast radius is very small. But in the AI system, the blast radius can expand. So
Right.
they need to have this horizontal thought process. Okay,
Makes sense.
and one particular thing, this came from a very nice book called Power of Prediction. I don't remember the author. It's a fairly recent book, say 2021 or 2022.
Okay.
They give a very nice, I would say, equation. Okay, prediction plus judgment is equal to decision, is what is the equation is. Okay,
Right.
so what does a product manager do? They have a problem, they have a hypothesis. The hypothesis, they run experiment, and the experiment spews out something. And based on the spewing out, they apply the judgment with the business context and decide this is how you need to do that.
Correct.
Right? Now, what are the changes? One is you can run multiple parallel experiment because of the AI things. So how do you deploy that particular delegation of that particular thing, right? In terms of how you'll do that. Second thing is this prediction. AI system, one of the fundamental things data plus AI is giving you is it could reduce the time to predict and spew out multiple predictions based on changes. Right? You need to handle this, I would say, deluge of predictions which would come out of these data plus AI systems. And how do you apply the judgment for the right decisions, right?
Correct.
So this is I would say, kind of a nice equation which I found in that book, which just came to my mind and I'm just talking about it. This is something I think product managers should be aware of. And from a business context, Malti, I would say there are three layers on which the product managers need to operate, and that is highly contextual, tactical. Okay, whether they want to build a point solution. A point solution is classic. All Chat GPT chatbots are there, right? It is a point solution to aid a specific problem. It could be the support problem, or they are creating application. I myself was fortunate to build the trust platform, right? It is a application on top of the data platform, the fraud prevention in Ola, which I built. So it's a application, or they want to build a complete system, the entire data platform layer, right, which we talked about so far. That's a system level problem. So you have to kind of figure out which is the problem you are going to solve. So these are all, I would say, bunch of things data product managers need to think about, and these are the differentiating traits which they have to bring to the table. Not against a traditional product manager can evolve if they add all this. It's just an additional effect.
Correct.
I wouldn't say they won't this thing fit in here, right? Of course, everybody evolves.
Yes, absolutely. From a hard skill perspective, Satish, do you think, especially we are talking a lot about data over here, right? So from a hard skills perspective, especially a data product manager might be very closely be working with a data scientist or a data engineer. So what kind of an upskilling or what kind of a technology skill level they need to acquire to be able to operate as a data product manager?
Interesting. In terms of hard skills, see, definitely I see people coming from more of a product analyst background, right? Where they day in and day out crunch some data. They have a fundamental understanding of, at the end of the day, it's like a fluid. It's like water. Data is, right? It takes the shape of what you're trying to do there. And there is this famous saying, if you torture the data, it will tell you what you want. Right? So they have this intuition behind them in terms of this thing. So I believe serving as an analyst, if you're directly jumped into a product manager after IMBS, I would still say go figure out some all companies have data within their listing, some sort of data, play around with that and do analysis on top of it and figure out what are the various semantics and shapes and this thing the data can take into and what are the insights you're trying to get out of it. So they have to use those data as a playground. Some will get permissions, and product managers pretty much they get permissions if they have the right problem, right, to do that. So acquiring that analytical skill on actual data asset is a important thing. Second thing is understanding this evolving processing landscape, right? So, for example, it's very easy to mix up a problem towards in terms of say the use case might be requiring a simple matching problem. Okay.
Okay.
And I have seen many people over-engineer it to make it more like a recommendation system instead of just a matching system, right? So understanding this processing semantics, so that they translate the business briefs into the right processing semantics and ask the right question to engineering. That is super important. So that is more of a experience plus knowledge acquisition, which the
Correct.
product managers have to do. It can't be like you become a data product manager and you don't know about how a cloud processing versus on-prem processing would fundamentally differ.
Right.
Okay, so I would say from a hands-on skill perspective, data analysis super important in terms of understanding how the data is. Second thing is in terms of non-hands-on, more from a knowledge acquisition and a landscape understanding perspective, understand the various data processing landscapes and talk that language. And sometimes you might be put directly in front of customers, and customer, your buyer, product buyer of your data product might be a IT guy. Unless you have this language which you're talking to him, he won't have confidence
Yeah.
because you're the guy building it. And if you're not able to talk his language, how will you drive confidence, right?
Correct.
So that technical understanding of the processing landscape is also super important.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And actually, there is a further nuanced question that I wanted to ask is that,
Mm-hmm.
see, the technology is constantly evolving, and as you said, people, whether it is product managers who are becoming AI product managers or data product managers, your engineering things are also shifting, right? But that also comes up that there has to be a right kind of awareness, expectation settings that has to happen with the leadership, with the stakeholders, right?
Right.
So, especially you come from you are an engineering leader, and you work very closely with a lot of other your in a box functions, whether it is product, whether it is business, and all that. So, what would be your advice, in terms of managing those dynamics, managing those expectations? How can these product and tech teams come together, data teams come together to set up the right expectations and with their stakeholders?
Okay. Actually, I'm just thinking it through in terms of whether there is anything different from what they are doing at this point in time, right? It means compared to a traditional product manager, how they'll operate with the various stakeholders. So what is changing here is the data literacy and the governance aspect of how they are promoting this particular, how they are creating a projection of this data and this literacy of this data into the organization is, I would say, super important.
Right.
Otherwise, what you're saying, I could boil it down to a prioritization problem in terms of the various requests which is coming in and prioritization, which is a classic table stakes for any product manager. The user centricity, and as we mentioned, the shared language creation. So these are all a couple of things which stays as is, right? Be it a data business, non-data business, or you are a data platform trying to sell it to the organization. So the only thing what I'm seeing as they need to additionally do is work on this data literacy and governance, and figure out where this can be helping your. See, at the end of the day, you are trying to data platform by, unless data platform is your business, unless you are the shovel provider, you are trying to enable some other business metric, right? So how do you identify that, and how do you tie it together? Quick,
Correlate.
quick prototyping of this data experimentation and show, hey, this can provide another 5% lift for you.
Correct.
And we could collaborate together on this, right? So everyone likes looking at that result-based approach and going ahead. So I would say the commonalities of how a product manager bridges the gap with various technical, non-technical stakeholders, GTM stakeholders remains the same. There are some additional things. This is where is analyst capability and connecting the dots comes into play.
Correct. And I think also I would say, when, for example, when I did my first as a product manager back in 2009 with SAP. The only form of data that I had was any qualitative survey output.
Oh,
There
nice.
was nothing beyond that. Right? So today there is tremendous amount of instrumentation. There is tremendous sources of this data. I think
Right.
I'll go back to that part of where you kind of bring in that judgment plus your, prediction part of it. So be data informed, right? But I think there were these additional nuances which you spoke about, because from an expectation perspective that it's not going to magic. While your data might be saying this, it is still an hypothesis. You still have to do an experimentation whether this will really work or not. And
Right.
added to that, this whole AI complexity of the plausibility aspect, which you spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
So while you might have predicted this is how it will come out, you always have those uncertainties which are much higher than a traditional software product,
Right. Right.
right? So yeah, so those are some different nuances. So I'll probably move a slightly different segment now, Satish. Is
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
we spoke about data collection, right? I mean, a lot
Yep.
of these decisions, knowing about your customers and the pointed solutions, for example, that you spoke about, that what do you want to achieve, and for that, what data do you need, right? So
Mm-hmm.
currently, if you look at organizations, they are all on a data collection spree, right?
Correct.
Because
Correct.
the more the data that you have, the more you get to know about your customers.
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
as a leader, how what would be your advice, right? How are organizations kind of managing while you're collecting with this data, managing the trust and the privacy concerns that the customer may have? Because
Okay. Just to rephrase, what you're fundamentally asking is, how do you manage the entire data platform with its collection, processing, and what it enables versus the trust and privacy issues which the
Bangor,
user have, right?
correct.
Okay. So there is this cliched statement, right, that um, necessity is the mother of invention. Okay. I'll just change it a bit. Okay.
Okay,
So like that, like how necessity is the mother of invention, I think tension is the mother of transformation.
okay,
Okay, so tension
uh-huh,
creates transformation.
okay,
In a little prior era, what happened is you have your business user, you have your product manager and tech teams. Business user will say, "Hey, I want to do this data. I want this data for so and so purposes, right? Give me that," and you'll give it. Okay, simple equation. Business user asks for a data, product and tech team either manually or give a API or do a data sync, whatever. Forget about the technicalities.
right,
Now, what is the tension here? You have your business user, you have your data product manager and the tech team. Let's combine them into a singular module. You have this additional entity called the DPO, data protection guy. Okay.
hmm,
Data protection guy, what he says, as soon as this guy asks, give me the data, this fellow will ask, why you need the data? What are you going to do with it? How long do you need it? And do you need the entire data or do you want parts of it? How do I know you will be keeping my data safe, right? This is the tension. Okay. And this tension is to create a certain trust and privacy enabled in your way you are handling your data. Okay.
correct.
Now coming to how the customer trust and privacy in terms of how do you balance it out and other stuff. Uh, Most customers are getting aware, right? So even yesterday or day before, I saw that these companies like Facebook and all uh, told that, yeah, we do hear to your conversation in terms of what you're doing, right? So there are two ways to think about it, Malthi. Okay, trust
Mm-hmm.
and privacy can be an enabler as well. Okay, it need not be always this tension creator. You can convert it to an enabler.
Uh-huh.
And how do you enable it is a question. Okay. And it is not like this is something new, right? Even if you remember right from our old school telecom days, you had this do not call registries. Okay. Now the mobile systems, which really put this do not call registries in a very nice production system, customers started opting for that more, right? In terms of this thing, the DNC registries of it. That's same like what is happening in the data world here.
Hmm.
So what I'm trying to say is you need to create systems where your customer feels right? That he can trust you with the data. Now, how do you do that? The simple thing is what the GDPR and many of the Regulation Act is given is you have to productionalize a system where the customer, if he says, hey, stop using my data or erase my data, you have certain systems to take care of that and give confirmation to the customer that he has the control on this particular data which he has offered to you, right?
Correct.
So that is
Correct.
one system. Second thing is, once you productize it, you kind of objectify that entire privacy and trust concept and apply it across all this flow. Because as I told, the data flows all horizontal in nature, right? You need to apply it all this flow so that you could internally see who is this customer's proxy within your organization, the stronger DPO. That if the DPO is like fine, in the sense the data protection officer is fine, that means it is a proxy to saying that the customer data is managed well. Okay, so that the strategy to manage the DPO is you have this nice enablers and audits out of it and certain dashboards and other things. You can productize this, spend a little time in productizing that. And what happens is, in once this two things are established, there is a certain confidence. Okay, I can use my data flow, okay, for all the purposes which the user has given me consent to,
Consent.
okay, consent and preference to. So once this is established, it becomes an enabler. Second thing is, this is a hard enablement. The soft enablement, your marketing team can really take this entire concept, right? How well you have created your data security and data privacy concepts and create a nice paper out of it and educate your customers, right? The user education part of it in terms of saying, hey, this is how we manage your data. You're completely safe with us. And at any point in time, you can opt out of me. And this is what I give you in terms of you can opt out of my app, you can walk into my stores and opt out, or you can opt in my website. So I would say this complete transparency of how they are handling, right? So these all can kind of become a trust enabler where more and more customers are ready to provide their data. And in offering of that, what are the exchange, right? For the trust they are presenting on you, you are giving more bespoke services for them. See, at the end of the day, this is what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to make all your products more and more bespoke to a certain cohorts of people, right? So once they start earning these services as well, and this balances out with the trust which they are present on you, I think you have hit a sweet spot. But this is a journey. It doesn't happen on day one, and it doesn't stay as a stable state. You need to constantly evaluate the system and keep on adjusting it so that you have this thing. In a negative system, it is much more easy, right? So when I say negative system, again, coming back to fraud, um, imagine all credit cards have this inherent trust mechanism, right? So suppose you do a sudden international transaction, you might get a phone call saying that, hey, did you do the 1 lakh plus transaction? So immediately your trust enhances and you want to stay with that banking. So this is what I am saying in terms of how you can make it as an enabler. So these are not new systems. It's just that older concepts are getting retrofitted. While retrofitting, you'll run into some challenges in terms of technical and operational challenges of how we are doing that. But fundamentally, I think this balancing act has been happening for quite some time. And the most beautiful thing is, um, okay, this might take long. Should I?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just an example came to my mind. See,
Uh-huh.
how do you trust the medicines you take?
My doctor prescribes them.
Okay, how does the doctor trust the medicine?
Probably the doctor would have seen some report which says that yes, this did work.
Who signs the report? Who signs
I
the
mean,
report?
there has to be some authority. So,
Exactly.
right? So, yeah,
It's like the authorities like the Indian Drug Regulation, FDA, and all
correct,
these, right?
correct,
You know
correct,
why pharma companies have this regulations and this thing? Because again, pharma is a probabilistic product. Many people
right,
don't know. It is
correct.
not like the medicine which you eat and I eat is really going to cure me. It might cure me 50%, it might cure you 100%. Another person, it may not act at all. Okay.
Or
So
may
it
have side
work.
effects.
Yeah, it might have side effects. That's the negative thing. I'm just
Correct.
talking about the happy flow here, right?
Right,
So this
right,
is where the regulator comes in. And
right.
he kinds of put in these particular this thing. And once the pharma companies get that certification, right? What happens? Your trust on that particular medicine goes up.
Goes up. Correct.
Similar thing will happen here as well. We are getting the DPDP Act. GDPR is already there.
Right.
CCPA is already there. EU Privacy Act is there. So how are you going to use this for your
Right.
benefits? This is another thing all companies need to think about. So
Yeah.
this
No.
just the drug this thing example just came to me. I thought I'll cite it.
No, it's very relatable, right? And I
Yeah,
think you kind
yeah,
of beautifully tied up these two aspects of thinking about it systematic from a system perspective, putting those checkpoints,
right.
and at the same time, how do you kind of make the whole customer experience very inherent part of it, right? Because it's very mutual. That was kind of spoken very beautifully.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Satish.
Okay.
So, coming to the short questions, how do you think that AI will change the lives of the product managers?
Lives of product managers.
Yeah.
One is AI becomes a very nice partner for the product managers in terms
Uh-huh.
of their experimentation and hypothesis testing.
Okay.
Right. Second thing is AI challenges the product managers. So in terms of you can put in two windows, right? How my product is going to enhance the AI systems and how AI systems are going to enhance my product, right? You have
Right.
these two different thinking. So this
Right.
is a new challenge for product managers. Generally, they were thinking any new system, how do I use for my product? But the other way around is also true. This is where the feedback thingy also comes in, right? In
Correct.
terms of, because as I told, it's a horizontal thing.
Correct.
Then the third thing is what I can think of is it challenges the product manager in acquiring more hard skills than he had in the past.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the whole data literacy and understanding
Exactly.
the AI/ML, what it can do, cannot
Regulations.
do,
Yeah. Yeah.
regulations. There are
Regulations. Yeah. Yeah.
there are
It's a
more
big challenge.
stakeholders to manage.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's a very distinct. Okay, next thing which I have is that what steps can an organization take to maintain high data quality, and how can data platform facilitate this process?
Oh, this would be a podcast on its own. But let me try. Let me try.
Sure.
Let me try to brief it as quickly as possible.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Data quality is a first class citizen in a data platform.
Right.
Okay. Unlike you have a tester who's sitting outside for your traditional products, data quality becomes inherent because once the data is corrupted in a large data asset, uncorruption or unblending is simply impossible.
Super hard.
You have to do the entire thing again, right?
Right. Right.
So, from a quality goals perspective, you have three major pillars. This is pure data engineering stuff. I'll just talk it. One is the data monitoring and observability aspect. Second is called the data profiling aspect, and third is called the data munging or data wrangling aspect. Okay,
Okay.
I'll come to the quality goals. So, quality goals primarily you are looking at four things. Okay, completeness, correctness, consistency, and timeliness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So completeness, I think everyone understands. Correctness, everyone understands. Correctness is both in terms of metadata, how uniform and standardized it is, and actual the values of the data, right?
Mm.
Both dimensions. Consistency is whether the same kind of data is flowing in, right? In terms of say suddenly from a water tap, if you're getting KWH data, something is terribly wrong. Somewhere the system is mixed up, right? So in terms of
Right.
consistency of what is coming. The
Correct.
last thing is super important, the timeliness of the data, right? So any data beyond a certain point becomes stale.
Mm.
I know many organizations have 20 years, 30 years of data. Unless it's a legal data, I don't know why they have it, in all honesty. But the timeliness is like, it can create real havoc. So there is another equation, like the prediction plus judgment equation. You have this. What is the AI ready data equation? This comes from one of my close friend in Brightfield who quoted this, right? So you have the data value and the timestamp, okay, is
Mm-hmm.
equal to AI ready data product. So
Yeah.
suppose any of this is going wrong, you would get a bunch of creatures there. Okay, suppose the timestamp is not there. Okay, we call it so timestamp can be not there and data value is not there. Same timestamp, two data values can come. So you
Mm.
need to kind of manage all these various aspects in terms of the timeliness of data to make it AI ready. Okay.
Right.
Then in terms of data profiling, this is the classic statistics, basic stats like count, min, max, average, median. So this all gives you the shape of the data, right? And the semantics of the data. Then you have advanced patterns, which is where AI comes in. Say the value distribution, pattern analysis, anomaly detection, and all these. This is the profiling concept, right? Then the monitoring is where the classic, how systems you will operate for prevention, detection, and mitigation. These are the other items which you need to think about. Then the last thing is the wrangling of the data. So in data, one good thing because of the statistical and AI advancements you have it is you could treat them, you could heal them. You cannot heal a transaction. Suppose you miss a transaction, you have to call the customer and kind of figure it out. But in a data flow, especially from a marketing data or a data platform perspective, suppose say 1 hour of data is missing, from an insights perspective or for a consumption perspective, you could figure out all the past patterns and come up with a heuristic or a ML driven system to impute the data. This is called the imputation process, right? Okay. And you can apply rules, you can find patterns, and you can do a bunch of these various activities on top of the data. So this is called the wrangling layers.
What do you think? Will the next breakthrough in AI will come from a revolutionary new algorithm or a completely novel approach to data collection and management?
I have a little different answer to it. It is going to be a complete ecosystem evolution. See, NVIDIA was a hardware company. If you remember in their 2016 or 2017, what is it called? That they have this annual AGM, right? They positioned themselves as an AI company. People were scratching their head. How would NVIDIA become an AI company? Now, if you talk about AI company, the highest valued is NVIDIA. The evolution has come a full circle.
Correct.
Many times we don't think about hardware at all, the chips and the firmware strategy, right?
Correct.
So starting from that point, the algorithms are evolving on a daily basis. OpenAI just kind of swarmed everything, right? In terms of bringing LLM algorithms, and you have various kind of LLM, right? The LLMs, the small LLMs, this thing, then the inference engines are putting so many items. So I don't think there is a specific area which is changing, which will really drive. I think this is a holistic ecosystem, just like how mobile by itself was not a change, but the apps on top of it and how people thought about it drove the change. I think a similar, I would say, wave is happening in terms of the evolution.
Privacy first or innovation first?
Whatever puts customer first.
Okay, all right. Small clean data set or large messy one?
Small clean data set.
Okay. Eliminate bias or manage it?
Manage it.
Who should own the data, companies or consumers?
The generators. I think regulations are very clear.
All right. Who break them down or manage them strategically?
Manage them.
Manage them strategically. Thank you so much, Sathish. This was really great. I personally had a lot of learning around data. So I think this was like a mini masterclass for me, and I'm sure the listeners would also derive a lot of value in it. So thank you for sharing, spending your time and sharing some really valuable insights.
Thanks a lot, Malthi, for inviting me, and glad I could share some useful information for your audience. Really happy to be part of the podcast, and wishing you all the best on a good growth of your podcast as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Product Talk with Malthi.